You know, as much as I love making end grain cutting boards for family and friends, I really do not enjoy the finishing process. Just working with mineral oil and wax, it's messy, it's time consuming, and it's really just not my idea of fun. So I wanted to see if there was a better way, and for me, I did find one using varnish. Okay, just plain old varnish. Instead of putting a real thick layer like we might put on furniture, the trick here is to thin the varnish out enough so that it soaks deep into the grain, in fact, all the way through the grain, and we let it dry so it coats the grain from the inside and essentially impregnates the board with the varnish, making the whole thing water resistant and that much safer in the long run. Now in addition, we can keep it a lot cleaner because now we can give it a good scrubbing with soap and water after every use, dry it off, put it on the counter, and you're done. So let me show you that process and hopefully it'll work for you too.
The first step is to dilute the varnish. We want this solution to be pretty thin, so dilute 75% with naphtha or mineral spirits. If you're using a wiping varnish like I am, dilute to approximately 50%. Now it's time to apply the finish. Flood the surface with the diluted varnish for a period of about 2 to 3 minutes. Since this is end grain, the wood is going to pull the finish in as long as you keep applying it, but at some point you're going to notice that the finish is actually seeping through the underside, and this is exactly what we want. At this point, flip the board over and coat the underside. Give it a minute or two to soak in before you wipe the entire board with a cotton rag and set the board aside on its edge to dry overnight. This helps trap the varnish inside the grain and prevents it from leaking out. The next day, you'll probably notice a few areas where the varnish pooled and dried on the surface. And be sure to sand these areas thoroughly with 220 grit paper to get rid of them. Once the entire board is sanded evenly, repeat the whole flooding process. You should notice a dramatic reduction in the amount of finish absorbed this time. After drying overnight, sand the board once again with 220 grit. Now by the third coat, the board will probably stop absorbing finish. At this stage, use a clean rag to wipe on a nice thin coat on the surface. Now this is a critical time in the process, and the key is knowing when to stop. If we put on too many coats, we could form a thick film that would create some problems down the line, so use your judgment. I usually stop after the first coat that actually gives me some sort of a sheen on the surface. Now if for some reason the board isn't exactly as smooth as you'd like, feel free to sand the surface once again, but this time use 600 grit paper. Then apply one more very light and thin coat of varnish. This finish may not be for everyone, but it sure does the trick in my kitchen. If you're frustrated with the same old tired menu of finishing options, and you want something that goes down easy, try varnish on your next end grain cutting board.